I remember the first time we saw it. The ship, massive, ancient, and broken, rested half-buried in the crimson sands of the alien world. It looked as though it had been there for centuries, corroded by the relentless storms and the eerie, unending twilight of this forgotten planet. Our crew, 6 of us, had been sent to investigate the distress signal that pulsed weakly from its core. The signal was old, distorted, as if echoing through time itself. Yet, something in it called to us, pulling us deeper into the desolation. Captain Holloway led the way, her voice steady but eyes betraying unease. We descended from our scout ship and approached the wreckage. The ship's hull was twisted metal and shattered glass, scarred by battles unknown. Strange, alien symbols were etched along its surface, pulsing faintly with a sickly green light that seemed to bleed into the shadows. "Who built this thing?" whispered Ortega, our engineer. "No one from our galaxy," Holloway replied grimly. As we breached the ship's entrance, a wave of cold air swept over us, carrying a scent of rust and something rotten. The walls seemed to breathe, and faint whispers echoed through the metal corridors. Was it the wind, or something else? We pressed on, our footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that ancient eyes lingered in the dark, observing, waiting. We found the source of the distress signal deep within the ship's core. A strange device, humming with alien energy, pulsed in rhythm with our own heartbeats. Its surface was covered in writhing symbols that seemed to shift and crawl when we looked directly at them. "Is this alive?" muttered our scientist, Dr. Vela. Before Holloway could respond, the ship trembled. From the shadows, something stirred. A sound, like metal scraping against bone, echoed from the depths. The darkness around us thickened, and in the dim glow of our lights, shapes began to emerge. Twisted, skeletal forms that moved unnaturally, their eyes burning with ancient hatred. "We need to get out," Holloway ordered, her voice shaking. But the ship, it wouldn't let us leave. The air inside the ship thickened, heavy with an unseen weight. The dim emergency lights flickered, casting erratic shadows along the walls, twisting our own forms into grotesque shapes. For a moment, I wondered if we had already become something else, if the ship had started changing us the moment we stepped inside. "Move, now!" Captain Holloway's voice cut through the rising panic. We bolted back through the corridor, our boots hammering against the metallic floor. The whispering sounds behind us grew louder, almost forming words, but not in any language I had ever heard. I dared not turn around. Ortega wasn't so wise. He glanced back for just a second. His scream ripped through the hollow corridors as something unseen wrenched him off his feet. "Ortega!" Vela reached for him, but he was already gone, dragged backward into the darkness. The shadows swallowed him whole, and the only thing left was the sound of his breathless, strangled cry vanishing into nothingness. "Keep moving," Holloway ordered, but we were all breaking now, unraveling at the edges. We found another chamber, a vast circular room lined with skeletal remains. Not human, but something else, something older. The walls curved unnaturally, like they had grown rather than been built. That same pulsing green light oozed from the symbols on the walls, illuminating hundreds of long, clawed fingers grasping at the air, frozen in a final, desperate struggle. And at the room's center stood a towering monolith, jagged, obsidian black, covered in symbols that slithered beneath the surface like living veins. The distress signal pulsed from it, but it was no call for help. It was a beacon, a lure. The realization came too late. The doors slammed shut behind us, sealing us in with the ship's true occupants. A sound, deep and resonant, filled the chamber, like a chorus of voices speaking in unison from across time and space. The skeletal remains around us trembled, rattling in response. Then they began to move. Hands twitched, jaws cracked open, releasing whispers of hunger. The long-dead things lying in heaps at our feet started to rise, their empty sockets filled with burning green light. Vela backed against the monolith, shaking her head. "No, no, 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 they're dead," They've been dead for centuries. Not anymore, Holloway said, raising her weapon. I could feel something inside my skull. A creeping pressure. A slithering presence that wasn't my own thoughts. The ship was speaking to me, whispering into the deepest parts of my mind, calling me by a name I had never known. The walls pulsed, the whispering voices crescendoed, and the dead things lunged toward us. We were never meant to leave. I don't remember how long we fought. Time felt distorted inside that cursed ship, as though we had fallen out of reality and into some ancient nightmare that pulsed with alien memory. Our weapons tore through the brittle, skeletal forms of the dead things, but they did not bleed. They did not scream. They only advanced, limbs snapping and twisting in impossible angles as they dragged themselves toward us. Dr. Vela lost control first. I saw her eyes widen in horror as something ancient slithered into her mind. She dropped her weapon and began to whisper in a language that none of us understood. She stepped toward the monolith, arms outstretched, as if answering some silent call. "Vela, no!" I shouted, but Holloway pulled me back. "She's already gone," the captain said, her face pale with cold understanding. The moment Vela's fingers brushed the monolith's surface, the ship reacted. A pulse of energy surged through the walls, and the symbols burned brighter, searing themselves into my vision. The ship's interior groaned as ancient mechanisms awakened. The skeletal creatures froze in place, as if waiting. And from the shadows, something else began to emerge. It was massive, towering over us, its body a writhing fusion of bone and machinery, metal fused with decaying flesh. Its head split open into a vertical maw, rows of needle-like teeth grinding against each other as it breathed. Its eyes, if you could call them that, burned with the same sickly green light that pulsed through the monolith. Holloway fired her weapon, but the creature barely flinched. It turned toward us with slow, deliberate movements, as if savoring the moment. This ship isn't dead," I whispered. "It's alive." "No," Holloway said, her voice trembling. "This ship is a prison. Whatever this thing was, it had been trapped here for eons. And now we had become the key that unlocked its cage." Behind us, Vela's body collapsed to the ground, empty. Her mind was already gone, consumed by the ship's will. Holloway grabbed my arm. "We have to destroy the monolith." The thought sent ice through my veins. The monolith was ancient, far beyond human understanding. To destroy it would be like trying to shatter a god's heart. But what choice did we have? The creature lunged, its massive limbs tearing through the metal floor as it came for us. We sprinted toward the monolith, weaving through the motionless, skeletal husks that now stood in eerie silence. As I raised my plasma cutter, I felt the ship pushing back against my mind, flooding me with visions. Galaxies consumed, civilizations erased, entire star systems swallowed by whatever ancient intelligence now stirred within this vessel. I saw the fate that awaited us, and I fired. The first shot cracked the surface of the monolith, and a deafening, otherworldly scream erupted from the walls. The ship trembled violently as the ancient thing let out a sound that scraped against my bones and tore through my sanity. I fired again. The symbols on the monolith shattered, spilling burning green light into the air like liquid fire. The skeletal forms around us crumbled into dust, and the towering creature writhed, its limbs convulsing as it let out a final, inhuman shriek. With one final shot, the monolith cracked apart. The energy that bound this ancient horror to the ship snapped, and the creature collapsed, its body disintegrating into ash as the ship itself began to collapse in on itself. "Run!" Holloway shouted. We sprinted back through the dark, crumbling corridors as the walls groaned and twisted. The ship was dying. No, it was being erased. Reality itself seemed to reject it, as if the universe was purging this ancient abomination from existence. We reached the exit just as the vessel imploded, vanishing into a vortex of darkness that swallowed itself whole. And then, silence. The red sands of the alien world stretched out before us, and the sky above was filled with cold, distant stars. There was no sign the ship had ever been there. Only the scars in my mind remained. Holloway and I made it back to the scout ship, but we said nothing during the ascent. There were no words for what we had witnessed, no way to explain what ancient terror we had just set free, or if it was truly gone. In the quiet darkness of space, I heard the faint echo of those whispers, still calling to me. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. We never spoke of what happened on that world. Captain Halloway filed an official report. Distress signal traced to an abandoned mining vessel. No survivors. No alien life forms detected. The higher-ups accepted it without question. After all, who would believe the truth? But the truth never left me. I couldn't sleep after we returned. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the ship's interior. Those writhing symbols, the skeletal forms rising from the shadows, and the monolith, pulsing with ancient hunger. Worse, I began hearing things. In the silence of my quarters, I heard whispers echoing through the walls. Not words, something deeper, more primal. A sound that didn't belong in this universe. I told myself it was trauma, guilt, my mind trying to process the impossible. But it wasn't. 2 weeks after our return, Captain Halloway was found dead in her cabin. Self-inflicted gunshot wound. They said she'd been struggling with PTSD. I knew better. She heard the whispers too. Whatever ancient intelligence was bound to that ship, it didn't die with the monolith. It escaped, and somehow it left a part of itself inside of us. The nightmares worsened. I saw things that couldn't be real. Shadows moving in the corner of my vision. Faces staring at me from reflections that weren't my own. I woke up with strange symbols etched into my skin, burning for hours before fading away. And then, the signal returned. Not from that dead world. This time, it was coming from deep within our own solar system. A familiar, pulsing frequency. Calling me. I know what it means. The ship was never just a vessel. It was something more, a prison, yes, but also a doorway. When we shattered the monolith, we didn't destroy what was inside. We set it free. Now it's awake, and it's coming for us. I've sealed myself inside this cabin, recording this message in the hopes that someone, anyone, will find it before it's too late. If you're hearing this, stay away from the signal. It's not a cry for help. It's a summoning. The transmission ends. No crew was ever found. No ship logs recovered. But somewhere, in the cold vastness of space, that ancient signal still echoes, waiting for the next soul foolish enough to answer.